Alright, so now we're ready to configure our 250 Mini Racer with the OpenPilot software. And to do that, first of all, we want to make sure our battery is disconnected, and we'll connect the battery when the software prompts us. So for the time being, we'll just set that aside. And as you can see, I've still got the front of the quadcopter marked. I've also still have the M1 motor to turn clockwise marked, M2 counterclockwise, M3 clockwise, and M4 counterclockwise. And I've also put some masking tape on the nuts of the motors so that it's a lot easier for you to see the motors turning. Now, before we do start, you really want to make sure that your wires are not touching one another. Okay, we don't want motors burnt out or any mishaps. And then we just have to take the upper deck, set it aside like that, and you can see I've got the USB cable already plugged into the rear of the CC3D flight controller. And then I've got the other end sitting at the computer waiting for the software to prompt us to plug the USB cable into the computer. Okay, so let's go over to the computer. All right, to download the OpenPilot software, just go to www.openpilot.org, and when you're at the website, click on Docs and Software, and then click on Software Downloads, which will take you to the download page. All right, once you are on the downloads page, you can download the latest installer for whichever operating system that you're using. In our case, we were using Windows, so we would click on the OpenPilot release 15.05 Win32, and then just let the installer install it. If your board gives you problems on the latest release, for example, our board did, we had to scroll down and uninstall the latest version and then reinstall 14.10, go through the calibration, and then uninstall 14.10 and then reinstall the latest version and go through the calibration one more time, and then we had no problems at all. There are other fixes that you could do, but all the other fixes that we tried just ended up giving us what we thought was a dead board. So that's a simple solution. If the latest version doesn't work, just uninstall it, install a previous version, and try again. So we've already got this installed on our machine, so let me just bring that up. And here we go. Once the OpenPilot starts, we want to click on the Vehicle Setup Wizard, and then a welcome screen comes up warning you to make sure that all your propellers are removed from the vehicle. So ours are, so we'll click Next. And then it says to upgrade, we want to upgrade our board, and then we also want to make sure that this tick box is clicked because we want all previous settings to be erased. So we'll go ahead and click Upgrade, and now it's asking us to please connect the board to the USB port. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now it's uploading the firmware. Booting and erasing the board, so we'll wait for a minute. says board updated. Please press next to continue. So now we'll click next, and you can see down here we are connected. So now we come to a screen where it says Open Pilot Board Identification, and we're using the CC3D, so that's fine. It recognizes our board. We'll click next. Now the input signal configuration, we've set up our project to use PWM, which is 1 cable per channel, and that's the default. So we'll go ahead and click next. And now it's the vehicle type. Ours is a multi-rotor, and that's the default. So we'll click next. And now we're into our motor configuration. So up here is a drop-down box. If you were building different types of multi-rotors, for our build, we're going to use Quadcopter X, and then click next. Now we come into our output signal configuration, and the default is rapid ESC, which works fine. So we'll just click next. We don't have to change anything. And then it gives us a summary of the configuration so far. So we'll just click next. And now the Open Pilot wants to calibrate the sensor. And what we want to make sure is that our racer or our quadcopter is sitting on a level surface so that the flight controller knows what level feels like. So we'll just go ahead and click calculate because ours is on a level surface. Retrieving data from the board. And it says done. Now we can go click next. And now we get into our Open Pilot ESC calibration procedure. Now this is different than programming your ESCs with a calibration card. We don't need to do that. The factory settings are fine. So this calibration is in order to go live with the flight controller. So we need to tick off these boxes. It says I have removed all propellers. The vehicle is not powered by an external power source but by a USB, so we have no battery connection. And I confirm I have read and understood the above instructions in full. So now we'll click start. Now it asks us here to connect our battery. When we do this, we want to connect our battery and then hit the stop button right away in order for the flight controller just to configure the ESC to go live. If you wait for any length of time, you'll hear the ESCs start to beep and carry on, and what they're expecting is for you to program it with a programming card. That's not what we want to do. So if that happens, if you don't hit stop immediately, just click the back button and do this step over again. So I'm going to go ahead and connect the battery. So our ESCs just chimed a little bit, and then the software made the calibration for the ESCs to go live. So now we're ready to hit next. Our battery remains connected. Again, it asks us to make sure that we have no propellers on the vehicle, which we don't. And now we're ready to find the neutral position for each of our motors. So we can see that motor number 1 is highlighted and it needs to move in a clockwise direction. So now we'll click start, and then we'll move this little scroll bar until our motors start. There, our motor is started, and now we'll double check that it's turning in a clockwise direction. which it is, so that's wonderful. Now let me tell you a little secret. The increments here are quite large. They go up by 10. If you want to fine-tune this value, then just use your arrow keys. Down, up, and then you can move them in smaller increments and really fine-tune that motor. So for now, we're just going to leave this at the 1100, and then we can click stop and then click next. Now we see that motor number 2 is highlighted and it needs to move in a counterclockwise direction. So let's hit start. Our scroll bar should be pretty close to the same value. Don't worry if it's not. There we go. So let me check to make sure that that's turning in a counterclockwise direction. So it's turning in a counterclockwise direction, which is good. If you need to reverse the direction of your motors, just change any two of the wires from the ESC to the motor. But when you do that, go ahead and disconnect the battery and then reconnect it. You don't want wires accidentally touching one another. If they do, you will burn out your ESC and probably your motor as well. So ours is turning in the right direction, so we'll hit stop, and now we can hit next to go on to motor 3, which needs to turn in a clockwise direction. So we'll hit start, scroll up, there we go, and let me double check to make sure that that's turning in a clockwise direction. So the rotation on that motor is correct, so I can hit stop and then click next. Motor number 4 is highlighted, which needs to turn in a counterclockwise direction. So let's click start. There we go, and I'll just check to make sure the rotation is correct. Okay, the rotation of that is correct, so we can hit stop and then go on to the next. So now we're at our initial tuning screen, and we have a number of different models to choose from. We're using a ZMR 250 frame, but actually the closest setup is a QAV 250. So we'll go ahead and click that. If you don't see your, like for example, it has ZMR 250 here, but the ESC is quite different and our motor value is quite different, so the closest one for our build is the QAV 250, 2300 kV motors, 12 amp Simon K ESCs. So that's the one we're going to use. So now we're going to click next. Now our OpenPilot configuration is ready to save to our board. So we'll click save. Now it asks us to wait while it reboots the board, and our setup, our configuration is complete. Now we can move on to our transmitter setup wizard. So to do that, let's click on the green button. It tells us that arming settings are now set to always disarmed for our safety, so that's okay for now. We'll just click next. Now it says, welcome to the inputs configuration wizard. Please follow the instructions on the screen and only move your controls when asked to. So we're ready to go. We want to turn on our radio. Now, to do this procedure, your radio needs to be set up with a model and also bound to your transmitter and your receiver need to be bound together. So you can visit our website at learnrobotics.com. That has some detailed instructions on how to do that on this build, but we'll also take the time and put up a short video to show you how to do that. So at this point we're going to assume that that's already done, and we're going to continue along. So now we'll hit next. Okay, so then it asks us to choose our transmitter mode. Our transmitter is set up for a mode 2, which is the throttle and rudder on the left and the elevator and ailerons on the right. So now we'll click next. It asks us to move the throttle up and down. Toggle the flight switch, and on this radio you may have to move one of the accessories in order to do that. And now we can click skip because we don't have anything fancy set up. Okay, so now it says to center all of the sticks in the radio. So we've got all of that centered, and now we'll just click next. Move all of the controls to their maximum extents on both directions. So we'll just move it like the animation is showing. And then same here. Move the switch back and forth, and then we'll click next. Now we want to double check to make sure that our radio is moving, our radio and the animation on the screen are moving in the same direction. So we'll just move our throttle up and down, left, right, which is good. My radio, this stick is opposite to my radio, so now I just need to click the pitch box up here, and that will reverse things in the software, and now my animation and my radio are moving in the same directions, and this one is opposite. So I need to click the roll tick box, and that reverses things in the software, and now my radio and the animation are moving properly, or as they should. So now I'll click next. Now it says that I have completed the wizard. Please check below if the picture mimics your stick's movement. So it just asks you to double check that one last time. And it does. Everything is fine. So we'll click next. Now it says here that the arm airframe using throttle off and this is always disarmed. So now we need to turn this on. So we want to Click yaw right. So that means we'll put our throttle in the lowest position and then turn the stick to the right, and then we're going to set this to 15 seconds. And now we come down here to the save button in the bottom right hand corner, and now we'll click save. Click save, and now we are finished. So once we've calibrated our quadcopter using the OpenPilot software, we can disconnect the USB cable. Disconnect the battery. And then wait for a few seconds. Reconnect the battery. Now we want to make sure that the throttle's in the lowest position. Turn on our radio. Put the throttle stick to the right to arm our quadcopter, and then give it a little bit of throttle.